Hey, good morning, folks. It's Pastor Stephen back again with another No Frills Daily Devotional. And today's topic is Here I Go Again. Now, if a song is playing in your mind, you probably know what the next tag is, right? And so we're going to be talking about a concept that I started in a couple videos ago, but actually continued in yesterday's episode titled Breaking Bad. And it's this idea of how do I break out of sin cycles and sin habits, right? We have been given through the death and resurrection of Jesus, we've been given freedom from sin. But the reality is we still struggle with sin. And so in the previous episode, I was talking about, what are some tips, okay, of how do I break out of these sin cycles and how do I break out of these sin habits that I find myself looping back through again and again and again, right? And so I gave you 3 tips. I'll just run through those tips quick here. Expulsion, exposure, and endgame. And if you want more on those tips, make sure that you check out that episode for me, all right? And so I'm going to take you to a text in Jeremiah that I think speaks into this topic today. And so I'm going to take you to Jeremiah chapter 2, and I'm going to read verse 13. Okay, and Jeremiah writes this. He says, "My people have committed 2 sins." Now, Jeremiah is quoting God here. He's a prophet, God speaking, Jeremiah is writing. "My people have committed 2 sins here. Number 1, they have forsaken me, the spring of living water. And number 2, they have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water." And what is Jeremiah saying here? What is God saying here? What is Jeremiah writing here? And how does this apply to breaking sin cycles and breaking sin habits in my life, Stephen? Well, great question, okay? And so here's the deal. Jeremiah is writing 2 concepts here. We have this tendency, okay, to number 1, when we are going through life and we're finding ourselves looping around this sin cycle or this sin habit that keeps coming back. And I told myself I was never going to do this again, but here I go again, right? And so here's the idea. We forget that we have God, and we forget what God has done for us. We forget that Jesus came from heaven to earth, allowed himself to be beaten and crucified on a cross so that we don't have to go on this loop again, okay? We forget we have God and we forget what God has done for us, okay? That's the first thing that we do wrong. And the second thing is we have this tendency to think we have to rely on our own strength, okay? Where we think we've got to get ourselves out of this mess, and we try to muster up all the willpower that we can to try to break free from these sin cycles and sin habits, but we forget that you and I got ourselves relying on our strength, right? Got us into this mess in the first place, right? And so we've got to realize that we can't forget about God and what he's done for us, and that we have him to trust in, and we gotta stop relying on our own strength. And that's what God is saying here. You've forsaken me, and not only that, but you've dug your own cisterns, okay? And I want to riff on that just a little bit, because think about the juxtaposition that's taking place in this passage, right? In one aspect, we've forgotten God, who is the spring. He refers to himself as the spring of living water. And instead, we've dug our own cisterns. And I was thinking about what's the difference between a cistern and a spring. Okay, now my house has a cistern because it's that old. Okay, but a cistern would hold this old, stale, nasty water. Okay. In fact, my house cistern had a gutter system that would bring rainwater down a pipe and into this big cistern that sits in my basement. And that's what they would use for water, right? Water that comes off of the roof, washing all the bird poop, and down into this big tank that sometimes would have rats and mice floating inside of it, right? And that's a cistern, folks, okay? It's old water versus a spring, and a spring is continual flow. Springs provide continual flow. And so what God is saying here is, you've forgotten about me, and I am a spring. I am fresh water. I am new life available for you every single day. But rather, you've dug your own cistern and you're working with old water. In fact, your cistern is such a pile of poop that it's broken and it can't even hold water. We've got to stop forgetting that we have God, and we've got to stop relying on our own strength, because you and I don't have the power within us to muster up the strength to break free from these sin cycles and sin habits. And that's why here I go again on my own. And here I am in this sin cycle, in this sin habit again, right? And so what do I need to do then, Stephen? Well, I'm going to take you back to Ephesians, because Paul is talking about this concept again. And here he is. This is Ephesians chapter 5. This is verse 18. And I want you to listen to what Paul says. He's talking again about this idea of bringing things to light in our lives, okay? And he says this: do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. And what is Paul saying here? He's saying you've relied on chemical dependency, okay, to get you through life and get you through the day. Instead, you need to live with what's called spiritual dependency. You got to stop filling up on things, okay? Stop trying to fill up on things to get you through the day. Stop trying to fill up on things to get you through this life, but rather you need to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And when you are filled with the Holy Spirit, let Him be the force of expulsion that forces out those sin habits and those sin cycles that you get trapped into. Let Him bring exposure. Let Him bring the light to expose those lies and those roots and those sin habits and those sin cycles that you've been caught in. And let Him remind you of the end game. Let Him be the one who comes into your life and shows you how this has always played out. You gotta stop forgetting that you have God. Stop forgetting what He's done for you, and stop thinking that you got to do this alone. He's given you His Spirit. He's wanting you to be filled with His Spirit so that you don't have to go on this loop again and again and again. Hey, you guys, have an awesome, awesome day and be blessed.